Hey guys, it's Ashley, and today I'm going to be doing my first ever book awards of 2018. In the years past, I have done top books of 2018 or top 10 books of, whatever year it is, and this year I just decided I wanted to change it, and instead of awarding my top books, a place in the spotlight, I would just award, all of the books based on different categories. Obviously, these are still going to contain some of my top books, but at least this way I had a chance to look at different kinds of books that I've read rather than just grouping all of the fantasy together. I took some inspiration from Reagan and G from Peruse Project and Book Roast because they have done these book award videos in the past, and I needed ideas for different categories that I could group things into. So thank you so much for providing me that inspiration. A lot of these questions are just based off directly things that they have put in their videos, so thank you very much, you guys. I feel like I have to say this every year when it comes to a top books video or a book awards video, but if your favorite book is not included, or if I pick a book that you absolutely cannot stand, please deal with it. These are solely my opinions, and I mean you no offense by it. So without further ado, let's begin. So my first category is favorite male protagonist, and for this I am choosing Cale Westfall from the Throne of Glass series, or more specifically, Tower of Dawn. So we all know, if you've read the series, how the relationship with Cale goes from book 1 to book 4 and then to this book. We love Cale, or at least I loved Cale. Some people did not love Cale. And slowly we progress to Queen of Shadows, and your love for Cale starts diminishing if you have ever loved him ever before, and then you just kind of sink to rock bottom and you hate him. But this book is literally a godsend. It's the redeeming factor in the entirety of characterization of Cale in this entire series. I haven't made a review or book talk of this one yet. I've started writing the notes on my phone and I didn't finish, but I want to finish at some point, so you will see something about this at some point in the future. But for now, just know that I absolutely loved this book, and I loved Cale in this book, and his character arc from the beginning of this book to the end, his development, his perspective of the world, it's changed so drastically from the beginning to the end of this book that he's a totally different person. And I've never read a book, or if I have, it's not strictly coming to memory right now, that a character changes this much in one single book, and it's honestly not a big book at all. It helps that Sarah J. Maas has grounded Cale and his character in the series in the past 4 books before, so she didn't really have to establish him very much in this book because we already know who he is, but still at the same time he just changes so much and he becomes such a better person by the end. So category number 2 is favorite female protagonist. And for this, y'all are gonna hate me, but I'm going back to the same exact book and I'm picking Irene Towers. I've been saying her name is Irene. I don't know if that's how you say it. When I was making out this list and picking my books that I wanted to include in it, Irene was number 1, on the female protagonist. I had picked her before I had picked Cale, actually. Irene is way up here in my favorites. She just has such perseverance. She's traveled so far and experienced so much that I just have a profound love for her that I didn't have when we first met her earlier in the series. That's not really a spoiler, but you meet her again. She's just absolutely great. She's the best thing that I could have had in a female protagonist, and she changes quite drastically in this book too. She was smart and badass in the beginning, but she's even better by the end, and it's just great. So therefore, Tower of Dawn takes the cake for both the first 2 categories. I'm sorry, it's happened. It's too late to change it now. So the next category is best plot, or the plot that kept me on my toes the most, and for this I'm choosing Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. If you guys haven't heard me enough scream about this book in the latter half of the year, where have you been? I feel like I mention either this book or The Last Magician in every video recently, but it's just how it is because they're just so great. I've said multiple times already that this story has such a unique world to it, and it definitely does. That's what I love about this story, and that's, I think, what kept me on my toes the most, because I didn't know what was going to happen. I was so entranced and, confused, but also in love with this world that I wasn't sure what to expect next, and that's what I really loved about this. Plus, when you go into a book blind as it is, you have no idea what you're going to expect, and so adding that on top of the world to this just made this such an enjoyable read. We basically follow this girl who was born on the unluckiest day and is basically blamed for all of the bad things that happen in this town. It's so great, and it's just got such twists and turns to it, and I love it to death. So next I've got the Best Cover Award, and this award this year is going to go to Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This cover is so beautiful. I'm sorry there's a tiny bit of a glare when I'm holding this. Maybe if I come back a little bit more. Nope, it's still there. This cover is so beautiful. It was so drop dead gorgeous when it was first revealed to us, let alone when I have it in my hand right now. I don't even know what else to say about this. This is beautiful. Also, when it's naked, it's beautiful. It's just like beautiful all around, and I can't have asked for a better book for this, or better cover for this story, I should say. The story I really loved. There were parts of it that I could have loved more, but I really loved it regardless, and I am very, very excited for the next one to come out. But I did pick this book for the Best Cover Award, so I'll hold this here while you stare longingly at the cover because it's just so beautiful. So the next category is the Best Emotional Read that you've read this year, and although I know a lot of you don't like Sarah J Maas because of various reasons that I totally understand, she is claiming 3 categories as of now in this video because for this I am picking Kingdom of Ash. I won't say a whole lot about this book because obviously it's the last book in a very long series, but it was so great. It was very, very emotional. I've cried multiple times. Parts of it were a little weird, but you know, I stuck through it and I cried and I laughed and I had a good and a horrible time, and it was just emotions all around were just high. I have nothing else to say about that. So the next category in my book awards is the Best Fangirl Worthy Read, and when I took this question from G of Book Roast's video, she basically called this the book that she would be most likely to buy merchandise for, to really get into the fandom for. And for this, I am picking Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I will say that I did love the characters though, and I did love the plot, and I loved the sass and the snark, and I just really loved a lot of this book. It's just, you know, the main plot points kind of escape me because I read it so long ago, but I can totally seeing this world and these characters as very fangirl worthy, very like, you know, I could totally get into this fandom and start buying all the merchandise for it. And I'm very eager to reread this book come the new year because I am actually going to a Leigh Bardugo signing at the end of January, so I am determined to read all of the Grisha trilogy and reread Six of Crows and finally finish Crooked Kingdom because I never actually finished it, which should show you how much I remember about the series because I got halfway through and didn't even finish it. I'm planning on doing all of that before I go to that signing at the very end of January. So hopefully I'll feel better about this book and this will be a more worthy book of this category, but for now this is what I'm picking. So for the next category I have the funniest book that I've read this year, and for this I am basically picking anything by Morgan Matson. This summer was the summer where I just binged contemporary, and it was the time when I first started getting into Morgan Matson. I read my first book by her and it was great and it was hilarious and I loved it so much, and I moved on to the next 2 by her and it was so great, and I highly recommend if you're looking for just a really funny, really fun contemporary read. They're so good for the summertime. Highly recommend. I feel like Morgan Matson has been a really beloved author on BookTube for as long as I can remember, and I'm sad that I just now got into her books, but I know I have a few more left before I can finish all of what she's had written so far, even though Second Chance Summer I've heard is really sad, but still. I'm just really glad that I have more of her to read because I really love her stories, and the 3 that I have read were really funny and really fun, and I really loved them a lot. So next up we have the Best Contemporary of the Year, and for this I am choosing The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, which I have talked about many times in previous videos. If you haven't heard of this book, it's basically her trying to find this place in this world between 2 opposing, you know, things that are throwing her against each other. You know, her mom wants one thing for her, she wants the other thing. So I highly recommend, if you haven't picked up this yet, or if you have the book, like just listen to the audiobook while you're reading, or just listen to the audiobook in general because it's so good. Xiomara just has a really powerful voice and a very strong standout voice that I really love, and every time, the one thing that I remember the most about that book is listening to the audiobook and just listening to Elizabeth Acevedo read the poetry and just like hearing it and like really like feeling with it. So the next category that I have is the best fantasy or sci-fi book that I've read this year, and for this I am picking The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell, as well as The Devil's Thief, which was the sequel that came out this year as well. I'm not gonna say much on this book because I've talked about this way too much on my channel. It's a really good fantasy book. It's like a historical fiction mixed with a fantasy, 1902 New York, with a heist and a time-traveling thief and a illusionist, and it's so great and highly recommend you read, and that's all I'm gonna say because it's just really good and I've talked about it too much and I need to get moving on now to talk about different books other than this one. And the final category that I have on my book awards of this year is the best overall read of 2018. And if you know me well enough, you know the book that I'm going to pick, because for this category, I am going with none other than Obsidio by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Obsidio is the final book in the Illuminae files, which you know I love to death and have been raving about since they came out and since I read them. This book was just a stunning, amazing conclusion to the series, and I cried and I laughed and I got super scared toward the end that everything was gonna go the wrong way. But this book ended on such an amazing note, and I am so excited for Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman's upcoming series. I think it's called Aurora Rising, if I'm not mistaken, because I think like 20% sure, because I don't really know much about it, that it takes place in the same world because it's set in space again, but it follows totally different characters. Either way, I'm just super excited for them to be teaming up again to write another story, because this whole trilogy was so mind-blowing. I loved it so much. It's just so fast-paced and it's told in the weirdest format ever, and it just makes the story feel so immersive. Like you can just feel yourself in this world, and it's so great. So if you haven't picked up the Illuminae files yet, I highly recommend, if anything, to get to this book, because this book is so good and you won't regret, you know, reading the series just to get to the end. It's so good. It's so good. And so those are all of the awards that I am handing out in my 2018 book awards. I'm curious to know if you guys have a best overall read that you have read in 2018. What is that? Let me know down below, because I want to know some books that I should be getting into next year. I have some really big plans for next year as to what I'm going to read, so I'm very excited to add more onto that list. I think the books that I've mentioned have pretty much rounded out my reading year. I'm really glad that I've gotten to as many books as I did. I think this is the most books that I've read so far. I'm at 40 or 41 right now, and I'm planning on reading 2 more by the end of the year. So I don't think I've ever gotten past like 35. So this is cool. So I think that is everything that I wanted to mention. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you later. Goodbye!